I gotta tell you, I'm a little envious that y'all are up in the high country. So my family's from Lincoln, or so I'm down here in flatlands. It's about time to get up in camping grounds.
Won't be long.
You can come on up, Nate, but you better bring your long johns.
6?
It's going to get cold.
Yeah, it's a bit chilly, right? I'm a couple months off. Yeah.
Yes, so that's what once you get personality, it's just a nightmare all the time. Bad decisions. Yes.
Same thing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Don't get me started.
I'm glad to hear that. Most times you just
I just barely typed it.
woke Robert
It's
up.
7 o'clock according to my phone. So we will call this April Executive Board meeting to order, and I'll ask Dennis Aldridge if he will lead us in an invocation, please.
Lord, we're grateful today to be a part of such a wonderful body and opportunity we have to come together and make decisions that impact the people that live in our communities and our counties and towns. Lord, we pray for wisdom, we pray for your leadership, help us to know the right thing to do, how to bring it forth to be most beneficial. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity of being here. This most beautiful, beautiful place. We're grateful for it every day. Thank you as we go forth, you be honored in everything we say and do. Christ, amen.
Amen.
We'll stand and do the pledge to the flag, please. Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. We'll ask for consideration of the March minutes.
Motion to approve.
Right.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll need to. How many do we have on Zoom, Victoria?
That's what I was going to say. I think we still need to do roll call. If you don't care, I think that's protocol.
We'll do that right quick then. We've got a motion in a second. I've got that part. Dennis Aldridge here. Jim Blevins. Rennie Brant.
Here.
Wes Brinegar.
Here.
Rocky Buchanan.
Here.
Teresa Kawada. Larry Fontaine.
Here.
Vern Grindstaff. Tom Hartman,
Here.
Gunther Yokel, he's here, Robert Johnson,
Here.
Mark Johnston, Brenda Wirely, here, Doug Matheson.
Here.
Todd McNeil.
Here.
Kelly Mullane. Is she muted?
Saw her up there.
She's up there.
Is she muted?
Yes, there she is.
Unmute here.
Okay, all right, honey. Bill Osborne,
Here.
okay. Kevin Reese. Bonnie Riddick. Paul Robinson. Eddie Settle.
Here.
Andrew Seuss. Larry Turnbow. Charles Vines.
Here.
Joel Whitley. Eddie Harper. I think we've only got 3 on Zoom. Does that sound right?
Yeah, we've got Winnie, Kelly, and Bill.
Okay, that's what I got. So, all right, got everybody there. So, all those in favor of passing the March minutes, say aye.
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 That's what I was trying to figure out who was just on Zoom. Okay, so I'll do roll call for the 3 of you that are on Zoom. For the passing of the minutes, Rennie, your vote.
Yes.
Kelly,
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes are approved and passed. Okay, next will be financial matters with Julie Page. Thank you.
Okay, the fund balance is the same from what we reported last month. So basically our total expenditures year to date, $3,605,461. It's still a total percentage of our fund balance expenditures of 17.8%. Our unassigned fund balance is still 15.29%. We have a resolution in place, but we won't really know whether that's going to fall below that 16% until we go through the audit for this fiscal year. Then Julie and I will put a plan together if we do go below that 16%. Then our total revenue year to date is $3,537.6. Our total expenditures is $3,605,461. And the reason that the revenues are under the expenditures is because we are generally a month behind in getting our funding in. So we are running on track. And then basically our cash balances, the operating account is $205,273. Our North Carolina Capital Management Trust account is $1,150,236. So we still have $1,355,509 in our cash. Our notes, I'll go over the budget amendment after I go through these other notes, but our benefits plan has been implemented. So now we actually have ISOL, which is where we do our time sheets, where we do our payroll, and now where we manage our benefits plan. We will be rolling that out so that employees will have access to them, make changes. I put it incorrectly on the information I sent you, so I apologize for that. We will actually be doing it in the fall for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So our open enrollment is for MedCost right now. It'll go through the end of April. And then the budget preparations, Julie and I have been working on those. She'll go over the budget with the full board, I think, here in just a little bit. So if anybody has any questions, okay. If not, then I'll go ahead on budget amendment number 4. The reason that we're having to add 1,010 to planning is because the ARC grant, we originally budgeted 42,295, but we actually got 43,305. They actually upped that grant award after we had already adopted our budget. So that means that 56% of that ARC grant is federal funding, and then 44% of it is local. So it raised that total budget to $77,331. And the reason we have a reduction in workforce is because the Max Carolina grant, it's our Fund 5211, they are being de-obligating those funds, so they have to go back to the state. We had not spent them, so because we had not spent them in the planned year, we had to de-obligate them, so we have returned those to the state. So that's why we're having to reduce the revenue and workforce. So that is why you have this budget amendment in front of you to approve tonight, so that we can update our ordinance and information correctly in our accounting system. Does anybody have any other questions? Thank you.
Motion. For the financial highlights and the budget amendment. It's one motion or,
Make that motion that we put it all together.
okay.
Second.
We have a motion in a second. Those here in the meeting that approve, go ahead. I'll let you go ahead and say aye.
Aye.
And the ones on Zoom, if you approve these, Rennie,
Aye.
Aye.
Kelly, okay, Bill. I think we
Aye.
approved. Okay, all right, so I think we got everybody on that, so that motion will also carry, so those have been approved. All right, next we have Cully Tarleton with a transportation update from the NCDOT.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate being with you, and thank all of you for your public service and what you do for your communities. Before I get in, Doug had told me that there were a couple of things that y'all specifically wanted to talk about, but let me open with a couple of other comments first, if I may. You know, DOT is principally a receipts-funded agency, that is, receipts from the gasoline tax. And when the shelter in place hit us back in March of 2020, people, of course, stopped driving. And when you stop driving, you stop buying gas. And so gas tax receipts went south in a hurry. And so for most of calendar 2020, DOT was suffering from a severe financial loss, which prevented us from doing lots of things. Projects had to be put on hold, and projects that were scheduled to start in 2020 had to be pushed back, and you all know that, you've seen it. But the good news is we're coming out of that. The good news is DOT is probably in the best financial shape as we speak right now, as we have been in the last 12 or 14 months. So projects are getting underway again, things are happening, and we're hopeful that with the coronavirus vaccine that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not another train coming, and that people will start, if the traffic I see in Blowing Rock and Boom is any example of what there is across the state, then I think we'll see gas purchases back up significantly, which means that gas taxes will be up, which means that DOT's revenue will be in much better position. So that's the good news. Now, Doug mentioned to me that two things that y'all wanted to talk about was litter and PAL bill funding. So let me talk about litter first. Again, the good news is since January of 2021, DOT has collected more than 3 million pounds of roadside litter. For most of calendar 2020, it was very little litter work was being done because a lot of that is done by contractors. And when you don't have money, you don't have money to pay contractors. So the litter was not being picked up. But we are seeing that change all across the state. There are lots of efforts underway right now to get people involved in their own communities and helping to pick up litter. Of course, one of the biggest things we'd like to do is to stop people from littering and stop people from throwing stuff on the back of their pickups and then taking off down the road, and then in a few minutes it blows off and blows alongside the road and becomes litter. Litter is unsightly. We're all embarrassed by the amount of litter that we see on our streets. But again, the good news is progress is being made, and we're in better shape today than we were in the last quarter of calendar 2020. So the private contractors that DOT hires to pick up litter are back at work, and litter is being picked up. I would encourage all of you to be a part of helping to organize litter sweeps in your own communities. I know some of you are already doing that. There was a big one over in Avery County that collected a bunch of litter. And I'm getting emails from across the state of people being involved in litter pickup, so we are making progress. The sad news, I guess, is as long as there are people on the highways, we're going to have litter. And I know when I was in Raleigh in the legislature, we talked about trying to increase the fine for littering, but you know, doesn't matter what the fine is, a person has to be caught before they can be ticketed for littering, and that in and of itself is a problem. If we could just change attitudes across the state about being careful with particular people who drive trucks and pickups, to make sure that they don't have things in the body of their truck that's going to blow out on the highway. DOT is very sensitive and aware of the litter problem. I promise you, it's talked about at every board meeting. Every board meeting, we talk about litter and what can we do to cut down on the amount of litter. So please bear with us. We're doing the best we can, and hopefully we'll never get it all. We all know that we'll never get it all, but we can make a big dent. As I said, since the first of the year, we've already picked up over 3 million pounds of roadside litter across the state. The other thing Doug said that y'all wanted to talk about was the PAL bill funding. And I guess at this point, I would want to know what your specific questions are to see if I might be able to respond to it.
So, quick question. Up on Beach Mountain, we do a fine for any littering, bear, raccoon, whatever.
Yeah.
Trash comes through. We're up to over $15,000 in fines on that, and have made rentals. We're working now on a trash thing that makes rentals buy bear proof garbage cans. I mean, I'm not really sure. I guess I'm just asking for other suggestions on what we can do up here per ordinance to make this, I don't know, well, a high country ordinance, or I don't know, whatever.
Well, I suggested to our people at DOT that they approach that they encourage folks to approach their local radio stations and see if they would run public service announcements, which they all still do, against littering. It's mostly changing attitudes. Now, I live on Main Street in Blowing Rock, about a half a mile from the center of the village. And I have to police up the area along the road because beer cans, beer bottles, candy wrappers, those sorts of things just get tossed out, or they fly off the back of a pickup truck. We just need to change people's attitude about littering and about the mess that it creates and how unsightly it is when it occurs. And I wish I could wave the wand and make it go away, but I can't.
What happened to the adopt the highway?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You might say it for me.
Rocky Buchanan has asked what happened to adopt a highway. And this
That program is still very much alive. If you go on the NCDOT website, you can find a link to adopt a road, and it's still out there, and we still encourage organizations to adopt a stretch of road and clean it up. So yeah, it's still very much alive.
Might ask you how the state of funding for the PAL bill is this year, how much has been added to it?
Well, unfortunately, the PAL bill revenue has been reduced some. The governors, you know, in the past, the PAL bill funding was paid out twice a year, once in the fall and once in January. The governor's budget for the new fiscal year, if it's adopted by the General Assembly, calls for that to be changed to a quarterly basis instead of twice a year. And so there's still PAL bill funding out there. The rules haven't changed in terms of what that money can be used for. It's just a matter of applying for it and seeing, you know, if your community, your municipality, or whatever qualifies. I have a list of the municipalities in our division 11, that receive PAL bill funding, and it was rather significant. So a lot of the municipalities and governments within the Division 11 have taken advantage of PAL bill funding. If yours is one of them and you want to continue to use it, I would encourage you to speak to your member in the General Assembly about increasing the amount of PAL bill funding that DOT can make available. That number is set by the legislature, and so that's how we can increase it. But it is a wonderful source of revenue. You know, there are restrictions, of course, on it, as you well know, but a lot of our communities have made great use of it. And I think for total allocations from PAL bill funds for Division 11 for 2021 fiscal year was $2,761,000. So there are funds out there, and many of you are putting it to good use. Any other questions? Doesn't have to be about PAL bill or litter. Any other DOT questions before I hang it up?
Coley, this is Chuck Vine from the town of Bakersville in Mitchell County. The amount, and I know PAL funds is supposed to supplement what you put in from the tax dollars to do paving, but there's no way that even that percentage of what's being put in there is enough to help smaller municipalities be able to do very much funding. If I took the total amount of dollars at one time that I would have gotten last year for that, I couldn't pave the driveway that was 60 feet long with all of it. Just doesn't seem like there's enough allocation to be able to do that, because it's based off of population, and that's just not.
Well,
you know,
as I said,
even some. I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
If you want to see more PAL bill funding revenue, then you need to speak to your state representative and state senator about allocating or designating more of their DOT funding for PAL bill projects.
I've complained every year for the past 25.
Well, I got the secretary to send me a list of the funding from year one of the POW bill, and I mean, it's a significant number. A significant number. Now, that number is across the state, and obviously the big municipalities, the Charlottes, the Greensboros, the Raleighs, the Winston-Salems, they get a big hunk of it. But as I said, for the last fiscal year, $2,761,000 of POW bill funding came to municipalities within Division 11. So that's Avery, Watauga, Yadkin, Caldwell, Surrey, Ash, and Wilkes.
Do you have the numbers for District 13?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Do you have the numbers for District 13?
I do not have the numbers for District 13.
Thank you.
But if you want those, contact your Division 13 division engineer and ask him to get those numbers from Raleigh. I mean, those numbers are available. They can be secured.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, again, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you, and again, thank you for your service to your community and to your state. It's important. Things don't happen by accident, as we all know. So all of y'all make it happen, and so thank you. We're very, very grateful for your service.
Thank you for your time, sir. We appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. I'm gonna cut out now. Thank you. Y'all have a good meeting.
Thank you. Next up is NC First Commission presentation from Amna Cameron, the Deputy Director of the Office of Strategic Initiatives and Program Support.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I am just going to share my screen.
Amna, we can see your screen.
It's not coming up on my computer. Okay. Okay, now I see it. Well, again, it is a pleasure to be here. I am going to just talk to you for a few minutes about the findings and recommendation of the NC First Commission. I have talked to you before, so you know this is the commission that was created in March of last year by former DOT Secretary Jim Trogdon to look at ways to both modernize transportation revenues and to come up with some sense about unmet needs. So the commission has one recommendation that came out in its final report that was issued on January 8th of this year. And that recommendation is a investment of at least $20 billion over the next 10 years. So the commission did not make any type of movement to say where that money should be spent, but of course that would be across all modes. So the commission divided up its options for consideration. They did not give any recommendations for a specific option, but I would look at these as a portfolio where they're hoping the legislature can pick and choose and adopt these through time and as they see fit. So the first series is what the legislature can go in and implement immediately and start bringing in revenues this fiscal year. Now, the highway use tax is a 3% tax on vehicle purchases. The tax is the lowest in the nation, and it has not been raised since the Highway Trust Fund was created in 1981. So raising that tax by 2 percentage points will generate $600 million a year. Now, if you trade in a car at the same time as you purchase a new or used vehicle at a dealership, you can subtract that used car price and only pay tax on the difference. But 7 states don't give you what we call a net of trade exemption. So the commission finds that these are very good options for a real infusion of funds. That net of trade exemption is worth about $100 million a year. Now, the commission, in a couple areas coming forward, finds that any revenue that is collected from a transportation area, a good or a service, should be used to support the Department of Transportation's operations. So if you rent a vehicle for a short term, like at an airport or for the weekend, the funds support the general fund, not transportation. Likewise, if you enter into a vehicle subscription lease, or if you use a service like Zipcar that is around so many college campuses these days, those proceeds also support the general fund. The commission also recommended a series of sales tax changes.
Wow.
So the first option supported raising the sales tax and using half of those proceeds to lower the gas tax. So as technology and mobility changes, the sales tax is going to become the likely collector of revenue from things like drone or ride-hailing services. So as we discussed earlier, the commission believes that a transportation revenue source should support transportation. So the second item is, let's say you go to Jiffy Lube and you get an oil change, or you go to your Napa Auto Parts for a spark plug, or any store that is transportation related. Those funds also go to support the state's general fund. In last fiscal year, that added up to $470 million. That is not going to support DOT. The commission also sought consideration for a per ride fee on ride hailing companies. And there are several states around the country that do so, along with localities. But right now there is a corporate tax on your Ubers and Lyfts, but not a per ride transaction fee. The report also seeks consideration for an increase in the electric vehicle fee of about $50 and a new plug-in hybrid fee of $80. So these figures would make the average EV and hybrid vehicle owner pay an equivalent amount to what an average gasoline powered vehicle owner pays. The next option seeks to study the taxing of vehicle weight based adjustments for vehicle registrations for commercial vehicles. So existing DMV fees do vary by weight, but more study was necessary to understand if the amount taxed is really similar to the amount of road damage caused. One interesting option, moving on, stems from the proliferation of e-commerce deliveries. E-commerce sales are growing rapidly. They're about 14% of total retail sales now. So you can really see how this was spurred on by the pandemic, where we are ordering so many more goods online, groceries, prescriptions, and this is really causing significant congestion to our roadways in our neighborhoods. And when you think about, it logically, this should be reducing VMT. But the studies that are coming out is saying that because it's such a convenience, it isn't. So for example, if you were to think, okay, what are my Amazon purchases this month? And you order everything at one time and you tell Amazon, you ship it when you have every single item ready to deliver. But that's not the case. That's what is necessary to actually have e-commerce lower VMT. But what's happening is you do that multiple times a month and you want it as soon as you order it. So there's not bundling of orders. So the commission recommends applying what it calls a road user fee, road impact fee to those deliveries. And the last option is to apply an inflationary adjustment instead of every 4 years to every 2 years. And that would just put about $30 million back into DOT's pocket during those years. Now, the next series of options are long-term modernization options. These are things that we could start working on now, but in reality, we're not going to get a revenue benefit for years to come. So the first is, honestly, I think it is the most viable option for the future for a sustainable revenue source to really just fully replace the gas tax. And that is a mileage-based system. And this is where essentially revenue is collected based on the use of the system. So mileage can either be collected by a device inserted into the vehicle through your annual inspection odometer reading or through paper tracking. One of the most interesting commission findings dispel a common myth concerning the impact to rural drivers. And the commission found in North Carolina and in the 7 other states where this analysis has been conducted, that drivers do not pay more from rural areas. It's just a slight reduction, but those results are consistent across 8 states. So the commission recommended that DOT be allowed to continue to study mileage-based fee and to move forward with pilot programs beginning potentially as soon as 23-24, likely targeting electric vehicles and hybrids. The commission report says its hope is that these tests work. They can prove the legitimacy, address concerns like privacy, and fully replace the motor fuels tax by 2030. Next are just a series of statutory changes largely. The report seeks to address long-term modernizations for highway tolling and public-private partnerships. And right now we have a statutory cap of 11 on toll projects, 3 on public-private partnerships. So they're asking simply to remove those caps. Next is to reauthorize the state and local infrastructure banks. And lastly, the commission supports the authorizing value capture techniques. Now, this is a range of approaches that aim to recover some of the value that is created as a result of a transportation infrastructure investment. So these would be including increases in property values, economic activities, and growth. You would be taxing that, especially, for example, if you have a if you want to tax right-of-way use, or especially along new corridors where growth is being created from a highway project. So that is just another tool. It would not help DOT, but essentially it would help those local, it would bring money to a local project. The next series are local government options. And the commission recognized the need for local governments to secure additional revenues and greater authority to pursue alternative financing approaches. The commission's report seeks a legislative consideration for an additional 0.5% local option sales tax to be used exclusively for any transportation purpose. So the revenue could be used to support local highway infrastructure, expand its public transit services, and the remaining 3 bullet points here I've already discussed in terms of a state context, and so it applies on a local level too.
So does any of the money that you're talking about go specifically to infrastructure?
On the local government options?
Yes.
Typically,
it sounds like there's a lot of spending, but there's not specific spending.
Well, it depends where it goes. So of course, if the highway use tax money, all of that money goes into the highway trust fund to support your STIP projects. And so a lot of DOT's budget is formula based because you know,
a lot of it sounds though that it's being spent in low country, but not being spent in high country.
Well, it's the money is appropriated by the legislature, and it follows funding formulas for distribution.
Okay.
So the report makes no recommendations at all on how this revenue gets spent. It simply says these are the most viable options for increasing revenue and how to modernize revenues.
Well, there's a lot of different revenues that will increase in the high country. That's my question. It's just, yeah. So what you're basically saying is we're not spending money on the high country because it's not cost effective.
I'm not sure why you would think I'm saying that. That's not what I'm saying. I am saying that the commission is coming up with a series of revenue options that can be used to support DOT operations. And then the commission came out with a separate series of options that would increase specifically local funding. Not under the control of DOT for those roads or those local transit projects. I'm not in any way discussing how the money is spent. So moving on to other options, as North Carolina really does prepare for this widespread adoption of new technologies, consistent high-speed digital connectivity really will be critical. So specifically, the commission supports additional investments in broadband. They encourage the ongoing integration of broadband installation into highway projects, especially for those that reach underserved rural areas. The commission supports the department pursuing public-private partnerships that can help expedite those broadband projects. Next, an advisory commission limits the total transportation-related debt service to 6% of our total department revenues. So the commission proposes reasonably increasing that debt capacity so that it is comparable to other states with a AAA bond rating. Lastly, to proactively address the challenges of integrating new technologies and modes of travel into the transportation network, the final item suggests that the NCDOT secretary establish a chief information officer to coordinate new initiatives. So that is my summary of what came out in terms of its one finding of at least $20 billion in that series of revenue options to stabilize DOT revenues in the future.
So any questions?
Thank you, Emma. It's always good to hear from you.
It's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Madam, this Andrew Suits from Wilkesboro. I got in late, so I didn't get to hear your total presentation. But everything that I was hearing was one thing that really I didn't like was the increase of sales tax. I don't like increase of any tax. And why is it that if we expand with more traffic and more people, then that means more people spending more money? Why do we have to go back to the people that's already there and get them to spend extra money? I just don't like that scenario. And it seems like that there's always somebody else that wants to stick their hand a little deeper in the pocket of everybody. And governments, as far as I know, don't produce anything, but they're really good at taking things. So why is it that we have to go to this sales tax incentive to increase it? What's the problem there? Why do we have to do that?
Think of it this way. We know that the gas tax is not going to be sustainable. You're driving more fuel efficient cars, and in the future, we're going to have a much greater electric fleet. So when you think about what car you drove 15 years ago and the car you drive now, on average, you're paying essentially $30 less each. For each citizen is paying $30 less over that 15 years.
Sorry.
Yeah, but in that 15 years, how many more people have we got that's on the road? You know, that's what I don't understand. If we increase people and we're increasing revenue by increasing people, why do we have to go back to sales tax and not raise the gas tax or not raise the electric tax or whatever tax that we've got to have for the people that's using the road? We're put a sales tax on it. Everybody's paying for it. A kid that buys a popsicle is paying more for it than somebody's driving 3 cars. It just don't add up.
You know, this was a recommendation that was heavily pursued by our state economist that was on the proposal. He felt that this was the most fair way, first because the gas tax is not sustainable, but also because the way transportation is changing, it's really not going to be about collecting revenues through a user fee potentially, unless you move to a miles-based tax. It's going to be a sales-based economy. So instead of you driving yourself around, in the future, it's going to be more of a situation of you taking the Ubers and those types of sales-based approaches to travel. It's not going to happen immediately, But in the future, our transportation revenues are going to be sales tax based. And so it's simply a forward-looking movement to be looking at the future of transportation and how best to capture those revenues. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but essentially to do a switch like that, you're either looking at taxing by the mile as your only option for maintaining a user fee. If you don't want to do that, then you've got to consider a sales tax. Anything else?
Is there any way of getting her PowerPoint to PDF and sent to us or something like
Anna,
that?
do you mind if I share your slides?
No, of course not.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. If you have any follow-up questions, I'll be more than happy to respond.
Thank you very much, honey. We appreciate it.
Have a good evening. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay. Next up is the update from NC Pandemic Recovery Office. Nate Alubka.
No worries. How are y'all? I'm Nate Alupka. So I wanted us to have more of a discussion tonight. Tomorrow I'll actually do the formal presentation. I'll just give y'all a few updates on kind of contextually where things are at and use the balance of the 10 minutes to do my best to answer the questions that y'all may have as they come up. So back on March the 11th is whenever the Americans Rescue Plan was passed. And within that, there was a fair amount of money that was appropriated to local governments. So my job within NC Pro as a policy analyst is to predominantly work with local governments. That was also my role within the Corona Relief Funds. Where we're at right now is we have two separate operations going on within the North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office with regard to local governments. One is to continue to help local governments across the state understand their allowable uses of the Corona Relief Funds, and certainly there's the accounting side of things. And then we're also starting to gear up to pull together the stakeholders across the state that will help local governments to use the funds that are going to come through the Americans Rescue Plan in the allowable ways that are set forth by Congress. Where we're at with that right now is, like I said, March 11th was when the bill was signed into law. Within that bill, it was stated that the U.S. Treasury had 60 days to essentially more or less get the funds out the door. What we're seeing and hearing is that the U.S. Treasury will largely take most of that 60 days as they're putting their guidance together. This is a little bit different than previously. Under the previous administration with the Corona Relief Funds, we got guidance in multiple different stages as the funds came out. So once the funds are actually released to both the local governments and to the state will have at a minimum 30 days, at a maximum 90 days to start to issue the funds through to the local governments. Now, there is a caveat to that the counties across the entire state will receive the funds directly from the U.S. Treasury. And then there's also select local governments with populations over 50,000 that will receive the funds directly from the U.S. Treasury. With the usability of the funds, we're expecting that the Treasury will, and also based on what we were seeing within the legislation, that the funds will be allowed to be used essentially the same way that they could for the Corona Relief Funds, but there'll also be some additional provisions. So some additional allowances for additional kind of above and beyond normal pay for those that are directly working with the pandemic. There's also some funds, and this is an area that we're really waiting to see what the Treasury outlines, which is funds towards infrastructure. I anticipate you'll have some questions about that, and unfortunately, I don't know that I'll be able to answer them all. So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now. We had discussions with the North Carolina League of Municipalities about a week or so back, maybe 2 weeks ago, to where we had a chance to talk with over 500 municipalities and their representatives. And then we've also recently been talking with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners to just, go through some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. What we're advising and what I'll advise largely tomorrow, beyond just setting the context, is for local governments to start to get ready for their funds. And that means making sure that they have some fiscal ability to control the funds, and also some staff that are, as best they can, up to date on what we think that the guidance is going to be, which is a little bit tricky right now because we don't know what that is. And then the key part is to start to plan, to talk with their communities, to understand where the funds could be best used in the area, so that whenever we get that guidance, you can best use it. So I know I've spouted out a lot, and that's why I think it'll really help. I'm anticipating that you're going to have a fair number of questions. Tomorrow, I'll go through some slides that actually outline a lot of this, and we'll go into a little more depth about things that we're seeing across the state. And certainly we know that there's variations between different areas of the state. So which brings up the second part is, this is important for me to learn from y'all about what you're seeing and hearing in your part of the state. Because no two parts of the state are the same. And the better idea I have about what's going on and the better idea the office has, I think the more effectively we can help the citizens across the state. So with that being said, Julie, I'll kind of hand it back to you and do my best to answer whatever questions y'all have. And then if there's, other areas that you'd like addressed, and if I'm able to, I'll adjust course tomorrow. But I do thank you for having me out tonight, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in the high country, and certainly for those that are visiting the area. I think everybody's glad to, creep towards normalcy here pretty soon. So Julie, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you to facilitate questions.
Nate, I'll just kind of make sure everybody is aware the meeting that he's referencing tomorrow is for with the managers, and I appreciate Nate being intentional about he's going to provide a presentation, but he really wants to have a dialogue, as he said, to make sure he has a good understanding of our region, what our needs are, and what will help them be more effective with distributing these funds at the state level, which certainly we appreciate. And then he was so gracious to add a brief presentation to you guys, so that y'all too had an opportunity to weigh in this evening. So I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of that context about the tomorrow's meeting. With that being said,
and Julie, I'll be glad to share tomorrow's presentation as well, so that those that are in the meeting tonight can see the expanded version.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Julie, is the allocation of the funds going to be based on population?
Yeah. So to restate what I think I heard, and it's just based on the communication being a little off with the microphone and everything, is the allocation based on population. It loosely is, yes. So there were different, the apportionment by state was broken up by population. And then once it got within that, there was basically roughly, there was essentially a $2 million apportionment that went to the counties. And then there was roughly 1.2 million that went to municipalities. And those calculations are based on population. We're not to the point to where we're able to give those final figures on what the federal government is releasing, because some of that is still being finalized. But to your point, yes, the population of the state was factored into those apportionments.
Just to add on to what, just to make sure that I understand that right. When it's handed down to the counties, then the counties will hand it out to the municipalities based on population.
Well, it's a little bit different. So the Corona Relief Fund sent the funds to the counties first, and then the counties had some statutes that they had to follow to forward the funds on to the municipalities. These we're calling them ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds. The counties will receive their funds directly from the federal government. There's the larger municipalities will receive their funds directly. And to the best of our understanding, the remaining funds will go to the General Assembly in North Carolina. And then the General Assembly will forward them on directly to the municipalities. And the General Assembly, to our understanding, will work based on, or my understanding is that the federal government is going to essentially dictate how much money needs to go to these municipalities. So in this way, the state is kind of working as a pass-through and is functioning so that whenever these smaller municipalities and mid-sized municipalities receive their funds, they'll essentially report to the state. That's the anticipation that we're having to work through. The General Assembly obviously could choose to go a different route, but that's where we're saying we're kind of in limbo to see exactly how this is going to play out.
When it comes to the counties, of course, we cannot be in the ownership and the business of infrastructure. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to give infrastructure money to people who can't do infrastructure. So are we going to be able to use this as leverage money for matching things with private individuals and private operations?
So infrastructure is only one of the allowable use areas. There's other allowable use areas that are outlined within it. And I have to say that the infrastructure that is outlined, as best we know within the statute, and we're still waiting on Treasury, are things like broadband expansion. We think because it's specifically noted that water and sewer infrastructure updates will likely be allowable once we know from Treasury how that works out. So one thing that we're waiting to see is certainly, different local governments have their capacity, what they're allowed to do and what they aren't. But there will be kind of this broad spectrum of how you can use the funds. And then there may be things that are allowable and aren't allowable based on the type of local government that you have. I would caution you to wait and see about allowability for essentially supplanting any general funds or anything like that. That may be allowable, that may not yet. But I would wait until we know for sure about what the U.S. Treasury is going to permit.
Any more questions for Nate or input? Nate, we'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Yeah. And I would say our office is here to help all forms of local government. And certainly if there's questions that you as your citizens want to raise up through your channels, then I'll be glad to help as best we can. And we certainly, again, thank you for the work that y'all are doing and kind of the foresight and planning that y'all are doing right now to make sure y'all are in a good position to help the funds once they work their way down to the local level.
Thank you. We appreciate
Yep.
your.
Thank you. And if it's all right, I'll go ahead and head out. But if there's any follow-ups that come up after I head out, I'll be glad to answer those. Just let me know, Julie.
Thank you, Nate.
All right. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good evening.
You too. Thank you. We can.
Hey. Oh, good. Thank you, Chairwoman James, sorry. It feels a little surreal to have everybody in the, well, at least as many of us in the room together. It really is great to see everybody. I have a couple of updates. So we discussed the budget in the advisory retreat recently and in the advisory committee meeting this evening. And the recommendation was to go ahead and present to you all the proposed draft budget. And the process that will follow is we'll we'll discuss it tonight. I'll present the material. We'll follow the process of getting it to the media. We'll have our public hearing in May and vote in June. And part of the reason we discussed doing this is with the interest in perhaps continuing to have maybe a hybrid option for our board meetings for at least a little while longer. This allows for what would otherwise be an extra meeting that we would have if we followed our normal process, which is typically then present in May, public hearing and vote in June. With this new virtual meeting law that was passed last year, you have to wait for 24 hours. So it created an extra meeting last year. So anyway, that's just kind of the context. So Victoria has brought up the budget ordinance. I will go over just the highlights and see what input, feedback, questions y'all have. Our total budget remains much higher than it had been as of a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic. We're still accounting for CARES funds. There's possibility that we will see ARP funds in the aging department. We don't know, we don't have any idea of what that would be, so that is not in this proposed budget. But it's a little less than what, as you all saw with the amended budget, a little less than that. So $7.16 million total. By department, that breaks down $3.13 million for the Area Agency on Aging. Largely that money is passed through to our counties, who then select a service provider. Workforce development budget just under $3 million. Planning roughly $824,000. Factored in is $23,000 for the lease renewal. And I shared with the advisory committee, good news is that our new neighbor, relatively new neighbor, John, has already inquired about potential additional options to renew the lease in the future. The agreement that you all supported last year was $1,800 a month for the first year, $1,900 a month for the second year, $2,000 a month for year 3. And with the timing of the lease, 11 of those months will be at $1,900 and then one at $2,000, so $23,000 even. The dues, which we're really trying to shift towards using the term match, because that's really truly what it is. And so the match increase in phase 2, as has been discussed in years past, is still on track. That's in the proposed budget. Not heard any further concerns about that. Also, as mentioned, is in the previous month's meeting is a 2.5% cost of living increase for the staff that is included in this budget. Really think those are, I'll probably stop there. Those are really just kind of the high level. Our budget is comprised, as you all know, primarily of federal grants. There's a little bit of state money. The local match helps make sure we're leveraging all of those federal dollars. Just kind of as a reminder that the federal dollars and the corresponding matching rates and dollar amounts do fluctuate, particularly with the planning department from year to year, just for various reasons. And so I'll point out an example when Julie brought up the additional $1,000 in planning. So we got a little extra in federal dollars, and that particular portion of the Appalachian Regional Commission grant, that particular one operates on a calendar year. So we have to budget with an unknown. But we also had a 2% increase in our match from 42 to 44%, also as she referenced earlier. So, there are some things like that, we just kind of have to anticipate. That being said, I'll stop and see if you all have any questions based on what I've said. I will email out the proposed budget document to you all tomorrow with some other materials that I have available, Nate's presentation and this presentation. I'll talk about the strategic plan in a minute for you all to review, but those are really the highlights. Are there any concerns about those before y'all have a chance to? All right. The second item that I have is the strategic plan. We've had a strategic plan. It's been a while since it was updated. We started talking about updating the plan. And so there is a draft that we have ready to present to you also. I think what we'll do, the advisory committee did support going ahead and sending it to the full board. I will email that out tomorrow as well, so that y'all will have plenty of time to look at it in anticipation of consideration in May. But what I will note, just kind of high level about the plan, is that it does take into consideration the existing plan with some of the things that were still seen and voted on as priorities in our strategic planning update session that we had pre-COVID, which in some ways feels like a lifetime ago. But it does take into account those. We did look at some other COG strategic plans as examples, as well as see, maybe some of the outline and things. And I don't want to forget to say that big thanks to Darren Rose at the Department of Commerce, who actually took the material. He and I went back and forth, sent him the notes, and sent him the work that we did at the department head level after the strategic planning session that we all had here, and put it together in a really nice format that you can go and reference and have timelines and who's responsible for doing it, when is it supposed to happen, and the items are easy to measure. Did they happen or not? So, and then in conclusion, he did note that it is a living document. So I just wanted to point that out as y'all go through that things are subject, even if we, you all decide to pass it as is, there's certainly opportunity all along the way to make revisions, edits, deletions, additions, etc. So I will send that out to you all tomorrow, but I'm happy to answer any questions about that preliminarily. Great. That's really it. I just will mention again that the managers meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We'll have Nate. I believe we'll also have Rachel Salzberg, I believe is her last name. And so if there's any, as Nate said, I'd be happy to relay any, insight on the region, any feedback, anything that y'all want to make sure that they consider as part of their process. I know we worked with some of our local governments with the administration accountability and the planning aspects of CRF funds. And so, we're happy to help in any way we can moving forward. So just whether it's relaying information or however you all see fit. That's all I have, unless y'all have questions for me.
Me. I
Well,
didn't think so.
board member comments?
I have a kind of comment or a question, and it's for Mayor Larley. I think a lot of us were kind of shocked a little bit about the DOT and this on the Anna Cameron's presentation. But I want to make sure everyone had a chance. I think Mayor Larley's been working on this project for a number of years with people from all over the state. And I think it's a 72-page finding document, very inclusive, very explanatory. You got two different curves working against each other. The longer we keep doing what we're doing, the more money, the less money DOT will have. And I'm sorry, it's just it's a really tough solution. And I think good questions were asked tonight about how come it always comes down to the the blue collar guy pocket that has to pay for all of this. But if you're interested in reading that, there's plenty of graphs, plenty of intellect went into coming up with these solutions. And thank you for your time that you spent on this. I know it's been a 2-year ordeal. So
thank you, Larry. And the big thing is every state is graded on their infrastructure. And we have a C grade. So when companies look at North Carolina to bring in their business, that doesn't look so good. And it's gonna take a lot of extra money to bring us up to B, not even considering A. We moved on just trying to make it to a B status. So the monies that we have tried to come up with in different formats would bring us to a B status. And I really think that C is kind of, I don't think that's acceptable when we're trying to bring in visitors or new companies to our state.
But it's a no-win. Coming from the trucking background, the weight initiative on there really sticks in. I mean, that's a tough pill right there. When you consider everything we all have comes on 18 wheels sometime. And that part of it, I mean, it's different. Somebody, buying a vehicle or filling up with 18 gallons, when you start putting 300 in a truck, that's a pretty good fight, no matter what you do. So that's that part of it. I mean, again, that's just my background, and I see what impact that would have.
And I do know, I saw on TV actually, that the national transportation people are going in that direction too. And they talked with some truckers who said it'll destroy us. If we have to pay more and have the brunt of the larger payments, then that means we have to send that expense on to the consumer. So everybody's going to pay dearly for it. So it's not a winnable situation.
Putting into a truck, talking spending $800 is
That's
pretty good.
Well, I can tell you this, I have trucks. And I can tell you this, when you pull up to the pump and it costs you $1,200 to fill up your tanks, you'll understand it very clearly then.
I also think the legislature is balking a little about the tax increase. They don't like to raise taxes on folks either. So that is one aspect that they are considering not bringing into the equation.
Miss Brenda, I was in Alabama this week. We go down to a spring game, Alabama football, with for a long time. We'll go by the Mercedes factory, which is near Tuscaloosa. And I was reminded that we were in the running for that factory at one time. And there was another factory, car manufacturer we were running for that went to Alabama. And Representative Tim Moore was in Wilkes County. We had about 300 at the Walker Center. About half of them were cooking his goat pretty good. And I had to lighten it up a little, man. It was just getting pretty hard. And he said we lost this second manufacturer because of some infrastructure issues we had on I-85 that they decided not to come to North Carolina, down Wood Green. And I stood up and I said, Representative Moore, we all know why they went to Alabama instead of North Carolina. They have a much better football team. We can get the infrastructure correct. I don't believe we can compete with that football team. Oh boy, that's a good one.
But the infrastructure is very, very important whenever we're trying to bring in new companies.
Yes, our ADC, we talk about it every month about it. Yeah.
Not very still, all the emphasis on the alternative fuel is straining at gnats and swallowing camels in my.
We got one hump or two.
Absolutely.
Any more board member comments? I just have one little comment, kind of on a personal note or whatever. My mom has been dealing with health issues for several years, and I just want y'all to kind of remember me in your prayers this week because I'm afraid I'm gonna lose her this week. she's, yeah, it's been an emotional roller coaster for the last month or so. And I just feel like her time is coming. So just kind of keep me and my sister and our kids in your prayers this week. And just pray that the good Lord will take her if that's what he wants to do and see fit, and that she won't suffer, which she doesn't appear to be suffering. She has Parkinson's and she's diabetic and dementia, but I think the Parkinson's more is what's going on right now from what the hospice tells us and everything. But I've kept her at home all these years, which is what I've told her I would do. I've promised her I'd keep her at home. And so I feel like I've done what I was promised, and I feel good about things, but it's hard. But she's 80 years old, and you know, she's my mom. But my dad passed away. That's the thing that's really killed me, is because May 1st would be 20 years to the day that my dad died. And so I'm like, oh, to me. But anyhow, but she's, you know, she's just, yeah, it's coming. So I mean, it may not be this week, but I just don't know that she can, you know, last much longer. But
Our thoughts and our prayers from Wilkesboro is with you.
do what?
I said our thoughts and our prayers from the town of Wilkesboro is with you. I wish you the best.
I appreciate that very much. But I'll keep you informed of everything if anything happens. So just wanted to say that, and I appreciate y'all. You're like my family, because I don't have much family left anymore. But so that's all I have. Do we have any other business? Were there any public comments, Victoria?
No public comment.
Okay, it's your go, Robert.
Madam Chair, I'm making a motion. We adjourn.
I'm shocked.
Those in favor?
Ah.
Good night. Good night. Yes. Thank you all very much. It was nice to be with as many of you as could be here. Those that couldn't, hopefully we'll see you maybe next time if you're able to make it.